This episode of the In Focus series features Callan Potter. Callan is a BJJ Black Belt out of Renegade MMA and an active fighter in the lightweight division of the UFC. Well, I thought we'll start off with this early photo. This was the early days, a couple of years before the cage was actually legalized in Victoria. You're seen here representing the Renegade gym, the t-shirt, fighting in the ring, fighting at one of the local shows out in the suburbs. This was before the time of the super camps, and I believe at the time, Renegade was still a fairly new gym, and you were one of the first MMA fighters to fight from a gym.
Yeah, that's all spot on. That was definitely before camp, the super camps, and before the cage. I believe that was a night of mayhem, and I believe I was locking horns with my now very good friend and main training partner, Jakey Matthews.
Yep, we'll get there.
Yeah, it was super early days then. Like that was before a lot of big transitions in my fight career, and Peter Hatton was obviously putting on those shows back then. And back then, you know, before there was any sort of large MMA events, if you wanted to get an MMA fight, your only chance was really to sort of piggyback on the back of a lot of those kickboxing cards, and that's how it was done. There was no cage, and there was certainly very limited MMA going on. I remember a lot of my early days. I was booking no holds barred fights, not MMA fights.
I've been there. I fought on similar shows too, where the MMA fights that happened in the ring was almost seen as a spectacle. We were almost like the freak shows of the night. Everyone was there for the boxing fights, for the kickboxing fights, and then here we were, two guys rolling around on the canvas, and you get some mixed results too.
Yeah, 100%. Some people are a little bit in tune with it because obviously the UFC was making some good work then, but a lot of people who were a bit more kickboxing based were very surprised. But I think they were just happy to see a couple of guys doing some damage to each other.
What was it like being the first fighter out of the gym? Was there a lot more pressure on you?
Well, kind of off. With Renegade MMA, I was actually member 001 there.
Wow.
So, Jamie and I, our relationship started at another gym called the Hangar 4, which is still kicking these days. And Jamie was a coach there, and I was a student there. And upon injuring his knee, Jamie had some time off, and then went on to open his own school, being Renegade MMA. And when he called me and informed me he was doing this, I said, "Mate, I'll be the first one there." And it worked out just like that. I was the first one there, and still as a white belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, never barely threw a punch in my life, and did all my training out of there. And like I said, the majority of my training back then was solely out of Renegade MMA.
What was your training camp like, training for an MMA fight from a predominantly BJJ gym?
Yeah, so it was very, very early. It was hard. I was getting all my sparring, all my rolling in at Renegade MMA. I think by this stage, I'd started making the track down to Kumaikai MMA, which is down Cranbourne way, the other side, with Ed Bavlock and a lot of those guys down there, and they were sensational. And I was very lucky that with Jamie was very open to have me cross-train a lot of different places. Renegade MMA was predominantly a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, so if I was trying to expand my MMA knowledge, I did need to travel, and I was getting down and doing a lot of training down there as well.
Yep. And yeah, you said you actually fought Jakey Matthews. It was a pretty stacked division in the 70 kilogram division. You had guys like Nick Patterson, Tom Ruderman, Corey Nelson. What did you remember from this particular night and fighting little Jakey here?
He is a little Jakey there. If you have a look, he just looks like a bub. He was a bub back then. Look, it was a big night. Jake was still very highly touted in the local scene because he, as much as he was young, he was doing really well in his MMA and his grappling experience. What do I remember about that night? I remember the dressing rooms being absolutely tiny, a little box set up in there.
You never know what you'll get in a change room when you're warming up. You would ideally you'd have like a matted area, but you never know what you'll get. Hey.
Oh, exactly right. You could be fighting here, there, and everywhere. They were a little bit more concerned with the venue itself for the ring and the spectators and that. And any place we could sort of go to get a sweat on, we were lucky.
Yeah.
And it was a great night. Jake and I actually competed for an Australian title that night, and it was a great experience. Jakey got the biscuits because he's obviously a super athlete. He's getting better these days, and it was a sensational night. It was good to be involved. Actually, that was the only time I had Ed Bavlock in my corner too. That corner that night, and it's funny how sometimes when you're not as familiar with people in your corner, you can't hear them properly. You will always hear
them a mile away.
if you got Ed in your corner, you are going to hear him. So that was a great night.
I actually had Jake on a podcast too. We were talking about this night and just talking about, you'd have to go through these kind of shows to get to where you guys are now. And obviously you guys made it to the UFC, but that wasn't overnight. You guys put in the hours, put in the time, fighting on these little local circuits to get to where you are now.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, there's a lot of shows like there's the Kings of Combat were another one. George Kolovos and the Brute Forces were another one. I know Jakey was on that circuit too. Yeah, that's how you had to do it. There was no Hex. I think AFC maybe was just sort of reaching at the time. Yeah, but if you wanted to get fights, this was your only opportunity. I mean, like I said, to piggyback on these kickboxing style cards, which would have a mix of kickboxing, Muay Thai, and then some MMA or no holds barred, however they chose to advertise it.
And you never know who you fought to, because these days it's almost a luxury. Guys had their first fights in a cage. It's all padded, sanctioned. You have a proper research of who you're going to fight. Back then, you didn't know who you were going to fight. No,
absolutely. It was a lot of time left up to the promoter, just saying, okay, this is the guy I've got for you. Especially in MMA, the MMA pool back then was so shallow that you'd very rarely would I fight at a specific weight. We'd find an opponent and we'd agree upon some sort of weight that we could both comfortably get to. So it was a very different time back then.
Yeah, fun times though, because you can't get those days back.
No, it was sensational. It was certainly not conducive to being a comfortable environment, but that's MMA. You're not supposed to be in a comfortable environment.
It builds grit, mate.
That's it, exactly right.
Moving forward to Hex MMA, backstage here with a referee, Greg Klingens. He was explaining the rules backstage at a MMA show. And I've been to a range of shows, kickboxing, Thai boxing, boxing. It's interesting how the MMA referees, they like to get all the coaches and fighters together to make sure everyone's on the same page on what rules are being used. What's it like for you and your team?
On the majority, by later on in my career, it did become a little bit of a formality. The rules there was a couple of changes here and there, but a lot of times the rules were fairly straightforward. We were fighting under the same rules for the majority. I'll give you a really quick story though. On one of the Hex shows I was fighting, I believe it was when I was fighting Abel Brights, and obviously a lot of the Hex shows were, we were main events, so we were the last part of the night, and they run fairly late, and that was when they just instigated the new rule set, and the new rule set wasn't meant to be brought in till the next day. Now, seeing as our fight was most likely not going to take place till midnight or later, we were querying about which rule set we would be fighting in. So, and we had Clanger on his toes with that one, but I thought that was very interesting. We were talking about what happens if it's mid-round and the clock ticks over. Can we quickly sneak in some of that new rule set?
What's it like for you? And what's the atmosphere like for you at backstage at an MMA show like this, having both corners together in a tight room? It's almost like a jits comp.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, look, you can feel a lot of different energy. People handle that situation very different. Some people don't want to be near their opponent. Every time they see their opponent, they have that spike of adrenaline, or that those competitive juices kick in. I'm fairly fine. I know that the business is going to happen no matter what you do between now and then. So I'm fairly relaxed around this stage. A lot of the times by my competition with Hex, I was fighting a lot later in the night. Yep. So I used to like to get there early and get comfortable, pick out a little nook somewhere where we're going to do our hands and our corner stuff, and just relax and take in the atmosphere. The town hall there was sensational. I got a lot of great memories there, and I actually found it quite a comfortable environment by the end.
Yeah, and also the pavilion being so close to your gym too. It's literally across the road. That must have been very comforting.
Yeah, it was.
It's almost like a training night too.
Yeah, just jog in, drop the car off at the gym, and by me, it had its pluses and minuses. One of the funniest ones was AFC had a competition there one night, and they had a day show. I'm not sure if it was on a Sunday. It might have been on a Sunday.
Yeah,
but it was a day show, and one of my coaches at the time, Heath from Metamorphic MMA, was coming from Melton, and I was living in Taylor's Lakes, and he was going to grab me on the way, and he was running a bit late, so I thought I'd give him a call and find out where he is. He's heading to the show. I said, "Oh, hey Heath, how you travelling, mate?" And he goes, "Yeah, got everything, got the bucket, got the pads ready to go." And I said, "Where are you?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm almost there." I said, "Have you got the fighter?" So he left me behind.
Oh.
Luckily, I could jump in my car and just drive down. Wasn't too far to go.
Yeah. Now, something tells me that you like your head kicks, because you've had a lot of fight in with head kicks. Now, speaking to Jakey, he said that back in the day you were a high-level footy player.
I was, yeah. I played in the VFL. I got as far as playing for the Bulldogs reserves in the VFL, which is Werribee, and I enjoyed it. Probably shows why the style of my head kicks are like they are. Very not overly MuayThai influenced, but they
That's
come a little
awesome,
bit.
man. Do you think much of that training actually came into mixed martial arts?
I don't know. Maybe, I had a level of athleticism through football, but I remember doing a lot of interviews and explaining that my approach to my MMA training is so vastly different to my football training. I was so much more naturally talented as a footballer, and but I was nowhere. I wasn't even 1/8 as dedicated as I was to my MMA. I put so much more effort and so much more time and diligence into my MMA training than I did into my football training. So there's definitely only very small comparison.
I've always been very curious of your head kicks. I've seen the hundreds of head kicks in kickboxing, and I mean your kicks aren't the cleanest, but it lands, and that's what matters. It does the job, and I've just been very intrigued about what you do to get your kick to that level of precision to make it land every time.
I can tell you right now, I didn't train them. I've got no idea. All three of my head kick knockouts is the only time I've thrown that kick. So all three of them. So I was trying to explain it better. The only time I threw a right high kick in that fight was that kick. And then I've had another one with a switch kick. The only time I threw a switch kick in that fight was that kick. And the last one, the other one I had with Stuart Dare. It was a 5-round fight. We were in the last round, and that was the only high kick I threw for the fight, and it landed. So, it's the sad thing about this now is Sammy Hayward, who's sadly on the receiving end of this, is one of my main training partners now, and we get along really well. And we were joking around training the other day, and we've trained together for a while now, and I completely forget that we even fought. Jake and I are in this. You almost forget when you spend that much time together. And I jokingly said one day, "Oh, your head kicks don't work," and Sammy Hayward had a very sheepish look on his face and said, "Yeah, they do, mate."
It's funny because it's such a small world, and everyone ends up training together sooner or later.
Yeah, exactly right.
Man, back to your fighting style. I've seen you come back from some nasty shots, nasty head shots and body shots, but somehow you come back, and oftentimes you come back and win the fight as well. I don't know what goes through your mind. Can you please shed some light on what's it like for you? It's almost like you have a kill or be killed mentality when you're fighting.
Yeah, so it's it definitely. I've had that, and you know what? I've been on both ends of the sword. It's a little bit that fight or flight mentality sometimes, and sometimes it works in my favour, and sometimes it leaves me a little bit rattled. But I remember the Abel Brights one. I remember my corner was telling me that at one stage he was saying he was almost thinking about pivoting the towel or something because he could see my eyes were rolling around in my head, and he was just more worried about hurt because Abel definitely put it on me. But I managed to I managed always to enter those fights a lot of the times in sensational shape and a lot of hard training, and that's what got me through a lot of those situations. So I tend to get hit and tend to get rocked a lot, especially at my lightweight, and that's what got me through. So it's certainly not a planned design. I'd very much like the ones where I don't get hit as much. I go in there and get a quick dub. But look, it's entertaining and it creates a lot of stories.
Well, that's why you're a crowd favourite.
Sadly, yeah, I'm a crowd favourite. Not a favourite with some of my family sometimes, but the crowd tend to love it.
Now, the aftermath of one of your fights, this was your fight with Khan Sandy. I mean, you guys had a war. You guys somehow was able to let loose after the fight and just be so chilled. What's it like for you after your fights?
Yeah, well, that's always been me. That's my natural personality. I think it annoys Dan Kelly to no extent sometimes because I'm constantly pepped as the nice guy, and I think he likes to see a little bit more mongrel out of me sometimes. Yeah. But that's just my personality. I very rarely take an anger or an uncontrolled aggression into fights. You know what I mean? I've always seen it as a competition, and I love nothing more than to show camaraderie with the guys I've just fought afterwards. That's a sensational. That's one of my favourite photos. And I'll tell you what, mate, when I'm all done and dusted, I will be pipping. I'll be coming after you for about half a dozen of them. That's definitely one of my favourites. So Khan's a sensation.
Speaking about camaraderie, do you reckon that's got anything to do with your VFL days?
Oh, maybe not. Yeah, it could be. You know what I mean? There's obviously the football mentality is a very teammate-based thing, and a lot of guys around. I just think I feel a sense of camaraderie with these guys because I know they're going through everything I've gone through. You know what I mean? I know that the Khan right there has probably gone through 6 to 8 weeks of super hard training, hard dieting, missing out on events. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
you know, I know we have to go in there and punch each other in the head, but how can you not empathise and find friendship in that sort of thing? You know what I mean? Like they're people fighting the same battles. You're not, and I think it's got a lot more to do with the early days of my fight career. Like anyone that was interested in MMA back when I started, of course I wanted to be their friend. I couldn't find someone that was interested in MMA if I walked 2 hours down the street. So I think that's what always drew me towards that camaraderie side of it.
I mean, like you said, a lot of the fans or drunken fans, when they see a fight show, they just want to see 2 guys bang on, but they forget the amount of training and sacrifices that goes into a training camp. And then after a fight like this, you guys just appreciate, you can't have a good fight without a good opponent. And you just thankful for the other person.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think. Nothing pops to my mind, but I don't think I've had too many of those experiences with a lot of crap talking. Like, I don't do it. You know, I don't do it because it's not the wrong thing to do. I don't do it because I'm hopeless at it. So I haven't had too many people do it in my direction either. So, you know, I've never had to experience like a what would they say, big grudge match style of thing. So it's always been very easy for me to have that friend or that sort of joint morality with an opponent afterwards.
Perfect, man. Now, it's not very often that you get to see an MMA fighter with the same team from the very start of his career up until his UFC debut as well. What's it like having a high-level Olympian judoka, BJJ Black Belt, and highly respected Muay Thai coach? How do each of them complement your style?
Yeah, look, I've spoken out on many occasions how lucky I am with my corner. You know what I mean? I couldn't be more happy with, you know, the guys out here. I'd like to really give a shout out as well to Heath from Metamorphic MMA as well. He had a big part of early on in my career, and he had a big place in shaping a lot of my fight stuff too. But the 3 guys here are just unbelievable. The thing I've always said about the 3 of them is they all have such different interpretations of coaching. And that's what's worked so well for me. Not only just during a fight, but even in preparation. You know, and Andy's very indifferent. I'm not sure you spend enough time with Andy. Andy's very indifferent. He's straight down the line, right in the middle. Jamie, because he's known me for so long and been my coach and friend for so long in my career, he's a little bit more empathetic and he's a little bit more of that emotional, that giving side. And then you got Dan Kelly, who just makes sure he evens out that other side real quickly. You know what I mean? If I haven't got if I haven't shaved properly, he'll let me know I've done something wrong. So, but he's had, I couldn't even put enough words how much influence he's had on my martial arts career. I in no way would be anywhere I am now without my interactions with him as well.
Yeah, that's the perfect corner, man. The super team.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I describe it, mate. The 1992 Olympic USA Olympic team right there, basketball team. That's what I should say.
There you go. What goes through your mind backstage before a fight? And also, can you run me down what kind of training, what kind of warm-up do you do before a fight, especially for a mixed martial arts fight? Yeah,
so by this stage, you got the hands up. I've always had the opinion that I stay super relaxed. I try not to think about the fight too much on the night of, which obviously can be difficult. I like to go out and watch the other fights, you know, and get a sense of the atmosphere. When my hands start getting wrapped, that's when I start switching on. That's always been my mentality. You know what I mean? I've always liked a big warm up. You know what I mean? I'd like to get a good sweat and really open my lungs out, and then plenty of time to recover afterwards. Lots of, you know, we've never had a textbook warm up. There's something we do every time. You know what I mean? I remember there's been fights where I've said, okay, yep, I'm good now. Or there's been fights where I've told Andy to grab the pads and go, let's smash out 20 kicks, because I've just wanted to get more on, which is a big change. Something that really sticks out to me in this photo, though, is I know exactly this is my first fight at lightweight.
Yep.
And Hex, and I for some silly reason I wore those tight shorts, the Fuji tight shorts, because I always like tight shorts. And when I cut down to lightweight, obviously I was a lot slender than I used to be, and I've normally got my big legs. I'm always very proud of my big, strong legs. My big, strong legs were not there. They were twigs, and I remember watching the replay with my tiny little twig legs going, okay, at lightweight, don't wear tight shorts anymore.
Lesson learned, eh?
Yeah, never again.
It just occurred to me that in this photo here, Andy, his fight name was Hollywood, and then your name's the Rockstar. How did you get given that name?
So I've always been of the opinion, I tell everyone that comes to our stable, you are never allowed to give yourself a fight name. You can't name yourself. That's just not happening.
That's very fair.
So I was given the Rockstar by BJJ Black Belt Mick Pope, who trains out of Renegade MMA, and I used to do the cover band scene, and I was the lead singer for a couple of different cover bands on the Melbourne pub scene for about 5 or 6 years, which was great fun, and he felt it necessary to dub me the Rockstar.
It works well, mate.
It does, yeah. I was happy with it.
Speaking back to your super team, how do you structure an MMA fight camp?
So, again, there's lots of drips and changes everywhere. So, all three guys have really good inputs into their main areas. A lot of my rounds were done, or pretty much all of my hard sparring rounds were done at Brazilian's training centre, which is Dan Kelly's gym. So we do like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday pro session there, which is a mix between MMA sparring, grappling, and big glove sparring. And then and all my MuayThai pads and my conditioning was done at the Ring Gym, which is Andy Colgrave's gym. And then a lot of my technical based grappling and that was done at Renegade under Jamie Murray. Yeah. And a lot of times we switch and change and move things here and there. But again, it was so good to have those guys really have the focus on their individual areas of the game, and then they would come together so well. You know what I mean? That they work together. Sometimes when you know what I mean, if you, like you said, comprising a super team in the corner, they can clash. These guys all worked really well together. Andy and Dan had already worked together because I met Andy through Dan because Andy was Dan's cornerman and coach as well, and Jamie's known Dan for a long time as well, and the fact that Jamie and Andy are both short, bald guys, I think that was just the tipping point, just them getting together. So it would all worked really well.
And obviously it's been working since you've been fighting on a local circuit with the same team from then to where you are now.
Yeah, exactly right.
Going back to this event, it was the BOA Super Series. Now, at this stage, you were already seasoned veteran in the local MMA scene. You know what's it like to compete under the lights. And for a lot of these competitors, it was the first time competing under the lights for the first time. I remember when I was working with Sai Naji, it was a hard sell to many people, and especially in the jiu scene, because they weren't sure what they were getting themselves into. They weren't sure what they're paying to see two guys grapple.
Yeah.
What do you remember from this particular event?
I remember the girls are checking out everything as well.
Oh, yeah.
It was a great show. It was such a good show. And the fact that Sai was involved was awesome. I got lots of great memories from this show. I remember the bout getting signed and talking before again about the super team, about Dan Kelly and his influence on my career. This is a great example. And I remember the bout getting signed. I remember Tiago, because we were doing a lot of our grappling rounds at Absolute then as well. And Tiago was involved in this as well. And he talked to me about it. I said, yeah, I'm happy to do it. And Dan come and asked me, he goes, oh, you doing the BOA? I said, yeah. And he goes, who are you fighting? I think I'm fighting that Burak. And Dan goes, and without a jocular tone in his voice, he goes, oh, yeah, I know him. He'll beat you. He goes, he's really good, and you've got a problem with competition. Wow. That's what he said. And I remember in my he walked away, and I just had this fire inside me, like, you mongrel. I'll show you. And he just knew his knowledge of competition and knowing what to do and what to say when is unbelievable. So it absolutely lit a fire inside me. So I remember the bout getting signed, and I remember formulating a bit of a game plan pretty straight away, with Jamie and thinking, Burak, and still to this day, I'd argue especially under the IFBJJ rules, Burak could be one of the best black belts in the country. You know what I mean? He's just a freak. And I perceived that even at that stage, if I had gone skill for skill with him, I think I might have been left wanting. You know, I mean, he's such a talented grappler. So I remember my game plan from that start was go in there and push pace. You know what I mean? I was in really good shape. I always kept myself in really good shape. And I thought if I could just push a pace and tire him out and wear him down, that's going to be my best bet. And it really played out for me in the end. But just so Burak doesn't lose any face, we fought again as black belts at the Pan Packs, I think it was, and he beat me by about 10 points. So there's no doubt he's one of the best grapplers in the country, mate. Don't worry about him.
Oh, he's a beast. Was it a big change in mentality coming from a combat sports background and then entering to a sport where there wasn't any contact?
No, not so much. Competition for me is competition. You know what I mean? Obviously, I wasn't too worried about getting cut up or bludgeoned too bad. But competition for me was always competition. I loved it. You know, I really enjoyed it. And I had my specific goals with the game plan and knew what I wanted to do. And you know, there was an audience. I always enjoy fighting in front of an audience. You know, some people dislike it with a lot of things going on with the UFC at the moment, but I've always enjoyed it. I always feed off the crowd. So to come out and see, I remember that big auditorium there. The setup was really, really cool. And you know, I sort of think.
Awesome, man. How did this fight get signed?
I was so hoping when I was looking at your highlight things, I was saying, I hope he brings up some photos of the rebellion. So
not many people can say that they competed at a professional level of mixed martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and also Thai boxing. Tell us about how this fight got signed and what was it like training for your fight here. And you didn't fight any slum too. You fought a fighter called Seb Holmes from a really respected Muay Thai gym called PTJ Muay Thai Gym in Sydney. What was the whole experience like?
Yeah, Seb, he was a beast. He had about 30 Muay Thai fights and extremely knowledgeable. I remember it was at a stage where we were fighting. We won a few of our titles locally, and there was a bit of a big span in between a couple of my fights coming up, and I never liked to have that long a break, and that we wanted to stay active, and I'd always talked about, you know, having just a stand-up based fight. You know, like I said, I like competition, and Andy and I talked about it, and he's like, look, there's a rebellion coming up, and I'm sure Sai would be quite happy to match you. And I said to him, I said, look, if we're going to do this, there's certainly not about, and he was in total agreement. It's not about getting there and getting a win and you know, walking over someone that's had 2 or 3 fights. I said, if we're going to do it, we're going to get the full experience. And you know, so we found the best opponent we could, and did the 5 3-minute rounds, full Thai rules, and got the whole guard.
Just to be clear, that was your first Muay Thai fight, wasn't it?
Only Muay Thai fight I've ever had, and the sorest I have ever pulled up from a fight in my life.
I can imagine it'd be quite different too, because you're going shin for shin for the entire 5 rounds. Oh. There's no time for rest. You're there to clash bones for the entire round.
That's a great way to put it. Clash bones for an entire round. I remember, you know, again, my one mentality when I fight is I tuck chin and walk forward, and I was doing that. And it was working quite well at the start, but Sebastian, being a very smart fighter, was starting to get the time, and he kept switch kicking my right arm. And at the start, I wasn't paying too much attention to it, and I reckon it was about halfway through the 4th round, he hit me again with a switch kick to the arm, and my whole arm just powered down. And I remember thinking to myself, don't show him. But I could not show him. I couldn't pick my arm up.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm in a bit of trouble here.
He's a big kicker too. How was the preparation coming for this fight? And did it play out how you expected it to play out? I mean, obviously you've got a great coach in your corner, Andy Colgrave, who's really respected in Muay Thai. Having him in your corner, you know, everyone would have thought Callan would be pretty well prepared for this fight.
Yeah, it was great. Look, we actually didn't change too much up. I actually still grappled, kept a lot of my normal routine like I would for an MMA fight. There was a lot more pads, obviously a lot more pad preparation. I did a few more specific Muay Thai rounds, but the preparation was still the same. Just got fit and strong, and it played out perfectly. You know, as much as we didn't get the win that night from the judges, I got exactly out of that fight what I needed. And as much as I talk about, it was the sorest I've ever been after a fight. I think I ended up having about a dozen stitches in my head. It was almost the most fun I've had. It was so much fun, and I still remember coming to my corner after the end of the final round. I just slumped over in my corner. I was exhausted, and Andy just looked at me and goes, He goes, "You had fun, didn't you?" And I just nodded back at him with blood peering down my face with a big smile on my face. I said, "Yeah, I did, mate. That was awesome."
What was it like being lathered up with Thai oil? Was that a new experience for you?
Oh yeah, I had some help from big Brett Franklin was in my corner too. Yeah, and they were lathering me up. The whole process was really good, having the garb on and having to seal the ring off. I pleaded my case to try and to ask if I could do a
White crew.
Do my white crew. I had a really special white crew messed out. I don't think Sai was all that interested. I don't think Andy was interested at all. But look, that everyone else missed out as far as I'm concerned. So, but like the whole experience was great. You know what I mean? I remember being, again, later in the fight, exhausted, covered in blood, arm just about to fall off, and just loving being there. You know what I mean? And that's what competition is to me. You know what I mean? Yes, you want to win and you want to have success. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't my goal. But those sort of feelings and those sort of moments in fights, which I'm lucky to have had a few times, when you're exhausted, sore and tired, and just there's nowhere else you'd rather be. That's what I've always fought for, and I've loved about combat sports.
I mean, props to you, man. Coming from a completely different discipline, jumping in for your first Thai boxing fight, fighting someone like Seb. And I was talking to Sai after this fight. If this fight was to happen again, I reckon it would be a great way if it was to take place under shoot boxing rules. It would be a nice even playing field for both of you guys.
So those the Haragoshis that I used are actually illegal.
Yeah. No one saw them. It's all right, mate.
They're great. If you watch the video again, I throw the second one in about the last 10 seconds of the fight, which is about the right time to throw it. And everyone we're right in my corner, and all my corner just go. Even Brett just goes, "Yes."
That's awesome. Now, moving from being a fighter to being a cornerman, you were cornering Jack Jenkins for this fight at one of the more recent Hex. You weren't competing this time. I think you were already in a UFC by this time. What's it like being backstage here, just being part of the corner?
Look, it's a very different experience. I've always found cornering a lot more difficult on my nerves than fighting, which sounds very strange. I always say when you corner, I actually get all the same chemical changes in my body that I do when I fight. I get a bit of a flood of adrenaline and all that, but I don't get to release it when I go into the cage. So I've always had a little bit more difficulty with the cornering. I do enjoy it. I always found, and I always profess that I was always going to be a lot more skilled as a coach than I was as a competitor. And I always do enjoy it. You know, especially when you've got fighters coming through that listen and that you've got a really good connection with. I've always had a great connection with Jack and a lot of my fighters coming out of Renegade MMA, Tawny and Cathal and Will Datto and Raphael Scott and all these guys. You know, I've always had the experience of coaching people that I genuinely cared about. And I think that makes a huge difference, huge difference when you've taken these guys into battle.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for up-and-coming coaches that wants to become a coach? Like, well, for example, like a fighter who wants to transition to a coach. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. Do you know what? Here's a good bit of advice. And do you know, I'll give you, I'm not one to touch on a lot of the bigger things going on in the world today, but I think it's a good bit of advice for people in general.
Yeah.
Ask more questions than you make statements. Too many people these days want to profess this is what I've got to do, this is what I've got to say. Ask questions. You know what I mean? Be a knowledge, thief as much as you can. Try to get as much knowledge. Too many people want to say, "Oh, I do this," or "I do that," and "I think this," or "I think that." Well, that's great. You know what I mean? But use it when you have to use it. But if there's an ability or a chance to ask a question and gain some more knowledge, do that. You know what I mean? That's how you get that person in the end.
I mean, that's why I love doing this podcast, because I get to ask all the questions I want and I'm learning along the process. I'm not just listening to a bunch of Joe Rogan episodes and just rehashing what he says.
100%. That's a great way to be.
Now, what's it like for you being in the corner of your team? And what's it like getting advice? I think I remember Dan going up at you at this fight.
Yes. Yeah, in between the second and third round. Yeah, even the commentators copped the side of it. It was great. Yeah, the guys are normally very different in their approach. Andy's very controlled, and he's getting across his instructions. Dan can get quite emotional, and normally Jamie's a little bit more of the softer side to it. But in between the second and third round of this fight at Marvel Stadium, Dan went to because I think we were about 1-1, and they knew we had to get this last round. And they wanted to spark me up, and I think Dan went to sort of go with his lead in, because he's normally the man that sets up this side. And Jamie's like, "Hold my beer, I've got this," and they just put a rocket right through me. But like I've said to many people, I only have to look at the response they got from me. We went in there and got the takedowns and finished, an extremely dominant round to walk away with the UFC victory. So you can't argue with their results.
Out of curiosity, what were they saying to you to get you fired up to win the fight?
They explained to me that I'm not a boxer, as much as I've had a sensational MuayThai fight. I'm not a kickboxer, and maybe I want to instigate a little bit of grappling in this round. And just firing up, just making sure that I realised how important this was. We're coming into a third round of a UFC fight where, if I had a loss, I definitely would have been the end of my UFC career. And it was possibly a 1-on-1, and this round was going to making sure I realised the importance of what I was about to walk out to, and it's exactly what they did.
Nice one. Now, having seen you come from the early Melbourne scene to where you are now, what was it like having your UFC win in Melbourne as well?
Yeah, look, man, that's something I'll never forget. It was an amazing experience, in Marvel and in my hometown, and being such a big underdog. Mucky coming off the Contender Series and looking like a beast, and I was extremely counted out by the general public in this fight. But the thing it's always been with me is, as you pointed out, I've always had to come back against adversity a lot of times, so that never bothered me too much. And I had great support from the corner, and it was just an amazing experience. As you could see, when my name got read out as the winner, it was an extremely emotional time, and I was thankful to have the opportunity, and you know what I mean. It was hard not to think about a lot of those older times and the path that I'd taken, the long path that I'd taken to get there when I was laying down in that octagon at the end. So it was an extremely special moment.
Yeah, that's why it was awesome, man. Now moving on to our very last photo, you're probably one of the more decorated MMA fighters that I've known, fighting on various promotions, like I said, Brute Force, Eternal, Hex, Valor. Would you have done anything differently in your MMA career if you were to do it again?
No, absolutely not. Okay. I'm sure there's things that I could have done differently that would have maybe benefited me, but everything serves its purpose. You know what I mean? There's matches that I've taken that I've gone and lost what I probably should have taken, but they've served some purpose. And to be where I am at now is because of those decisions we made. You know what I mean? I've had a great teams around me, and I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. But again, like I said, they've made me the fighter I have today. I'm lucky to have a whole bunch of what Dan Kelly calls indie belts, and a lot of great memories. You know what I mean? I love that hashtag as much as some other people don't like it. But that memories made hashtag is something that live with me, and I've got plenty of memories to take away with me from this sport.
That's awesome, man. You fought on so many promotions. You weren't one of those fighters that just stuck to one promotion and had padded records. You took big fights and small fights, whatever came your way, just to get to where you are now. And that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly right, mate. Like I said, competition was just an addiction of mine, mate. And anything I could do, if I couldn't get an MMA fight, I'd go have a grappling fight or a MuayThai fight, obviously. And anything I could do to stay active, mate. I just loved competing.
That's perfect, Cal. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cal. I really appreciate that, and I can't wait to see your next fight.
Cheers. Well, thank you very much for your time, mate.
Awesome. Thank you.